So here at KU, over the course of your first year, you will have 6 doctrinal courses and then 2 legal writing and research classes. Your doctrinal courses in your first year will all be 4 credit hours long. They'll meet 4 times a week, 1 semester each. So those courses are contracts. So that's just the law of contracts. If you bought a cup of coffee today, you engage in the contract system. So we have a course on contracts. Torts, which is not a pastry class, but that's a course having to do with personal injury or injuries to property. So contracts, torts, property, which is what does it mean to own stuff? What things can I own? What is this concept of property in the Anglo-American legal system? And you'll have criminal law, so the foundations of the criminal justice system, constitutional law, and then the very best class, which is civil procedure, which is how does one get a civil lawsuit from start to finish. Your 2 legal writing and research classes are cleverly called legal writing 1 and 2, lawyering 1 and 2, and your first semester of that course will focus a bit more on library research and writing what we often call non-argumentative or neutral memoranda. How do I just call it straight? And then your second semester will focus around the large project of moving toward a summary judgment motion, which is a type of legal motion in a civil case. How do I argue it? How would I mediate that? And ending with oral argument. So that'll be the scope of that 1-year experience. Within each of those doctrinal classes, as I said, they're 4 credit hours long each. You get 3 of them a semester. While your courses will likely have maybe a non-graded or optional midterm, or some of my colleagues might have a midterm for 5% of the grade or some other experience along the way, either 100% of your grade or gosh darn near close to 100% of your grade will be the final examination. The practice of law is a series of high stakes one-off events. You don't get to have 5 trials and take the average of those wins. You don't get to have 3 Q&A sessions, or excuse me, you don't get to have 3 closing of a real estate contracts and take the best one, or 5 chances to get this adoption right? You get 1 chance. And so this practice of having one-off high stakes exams is starting to mimic the practice of law and getting you used to these high stakes one-off events, and how are you going to prepare yourself to work ahead, right, and succeed in that space. Most of those exams are going to be either entirely essay or some sort of combination of essay and maybe short answer or multiple choice. They'll usually be based around some sort of hypothetical problem, which the answer being something like, analyze the legal rights and responsibilities of Ms. A, Mr. B, Ms. C, and so forth. Right? So, several of my colleagues like to get cute with their fact patterns. I have of late, since I have teenage daughters, had a history of Taylor Swift playing a prominent role in my fact patterns. All of that said, we don't like Taylor Swift in my house anymore. She's gotten too grown up with her, 30-year-old, lyrics. So we've moved on only to One Direction people. And I know that Harry Styles is one of them, and I refer to them just as the other ones, much to the anger. I know one of them is named Niall. Well, I really feel good by getting that down. So I'm down to 2. I have 2 directions. So I'm making some progress with that. So that's what that experience will be like. One of your classes, at least one of your classes will be in the doctrinal sections will be a so-called small section, meaning you'll have about 20 to 23 students in that section. So either property or civ pro or contract or so forth will be that small section experience. In addition, your lawyering classes will also be in that small section. You will get really tight with those folks. When you go through that sort of first year experience with them, you really will bond with those folks. And usually 80% of the time in a great way. There's always that one person like, I hate that person. Oh my gosh, he or she's in my small section. That's gonna happen. Sometimes Jake shows up in your small section. What are you gonna do? But other than that, it turns out being a great experience. It's when I go to reunions, people come back 30, 40 years later, and they want to see that person in their small section. It's one of those really cool traditions we have here at KU Law, which makes a difference. Your small section, in addition to being in those 3 classes, your lawyering classes and 1 doctrinal class, just as a small group, will take the rest of your larger classes together. So you're going to be with that small section throughout the entirety of your 1L experience. So you really will sort of go through the trenches with those folks. Your very largest class in your first year will not be any larger than 65 or so. And the majority of your classes will be in the 40-ish to 50-ish range. So that's what that will be like. You'll get together, and depending on how the professor, how he or she runs her class, but to a large degree, what you'll do is you'll come in having really prepared readings. You will have read either statutes or cases and maybe some regulation. And you're going to have a conversation about those issues, but it's a somewhat unnatural and high pressure conversation in which the faculty member will call on you. What were the facts in Jones versus Smith? Give us to them in detail, but only the relevant facts. And maybe we'll have a conversation about whether those were or weren't the relevant facts. What did the court rule? How did it rule? What were the counter arguments? Can you say that precisely and briefly? Can you apply that holding in new fact patterns? We'll have a series of hypotheticals. What if we change the facts? How would this rule from Jones versus Smith apply in future cases? Right, and we'll go through that process. That's some sort of species of Socratic method that can be heartburn inducing for many people. Now, and it's important to know what the reason for that is. For me, I find the tiers of 1L is nice because it keeps the puffiness down. And so that's really important for me to have. But for others of my colleagues, they believe it's important as an educational mission to ensure that you're learning public presentation skills, how to answer hard questions in front of people, whatever type of practice you're going to do, that's going to be a species of it, that you're being held accountable to doing your work on your own. Because no matter what we do in law school, and you're going to learn so much, as soon as you hit the legal practice, you're going to realize, oh my gosh, I know so little. And you need to learn how to be a great self-learner in whatever subfield of law you fall into, and we're building those skills in that process. So it is not designed to be an embarrassment or a pick on you thing. Rather, it's designed to help you build those other skills, right? And that's what we'll do. All of your faculty are going to do that slightly differently with different sorts of ways in which he or she handles that process. So that's what that class period will be like. I realize I have maybe 1 or 2 minutes left just to touch on what I think our law school is going to look like next year in the quasi post-COVID period. I think all of our 1L classes, as I understand it, so no promises, but as I understand it, all of our 1L classes will be in person. Some of them will not be held in the law school building. So we have, for those of you not on campus, there's 2 student unions on campus. One of the student unions, the Birds Union, is across the street from us. And we've been able to grab some space in the large conference center space in that building to accommodate socially distanced classes in that space. So my understanding is that we will still be in a social distance protocol, at least as things stands right now, if we have the vaccination rates that we expect. So that we will be mostly in person, but still in a social distance space in class with different sorts of caps on rooms. That said, I expect, but I don't know for sure, that we'll be back to having clubs being able to meet in person so long as they're in rooms under social distance cap and that sort of things. Whereas this year has really been an only online experience for the multiplicity of student organizations that we have. And we're really hoping, knock on wood, that we're able to have those folks be able to meet in person next year. So as Dean Freedman said, not 100% back to 2019 experience, but I'm going to say the fall, gosh, I'm hoping for an 80% back. And then maybe by the time we even get to spring next year, 95 to 99% back to where we are. So there's my 10-minute overview. Of course, I'm happy to answer questions, but I know Ashlyn and Jake are probably better answers for your questions.
Well, thank you, Professor Mulligan. Before we move on to just a general discussion, why don't we hear from everybody? Just go around and everybody introduce themselves. Maybe say, we can see your name, I see, but maybe go around, say your name and what your hometown is and what your, I don't know, one interesting fact, probably about yourself. How's that? I just put the pressure on, didn't I? This is your first Socratic method, moment.
I'll go first. So I'm Lumen Mulligan. I would be a 22L if we counted that way. My people often ask me about my first name. It means light in Latin. My mom and dad were honest to goodness, hate Ashbury hippies. And when mom was pregnant, they lived in a flop house across from a former monk and former nun who'd left the church to get married. They told me they were having a baby, and the former monk said Lumen Christi, meaning light of Christ. So I was this close to Moonbeam or Star Child. So as far as it goes, I think I came out on top. I was born in San Francisco. That's my hometown.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to have to call out people's names because with these Zoom things, no one knows who knows to go left. So I'm going to go in the order on my screen. So Randy Lloyd, you get to go first. And don't forget to unmute yourself.
There we go.
There we go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Randy Lloyd. I use she, her pronouns, and my hometown is Wichita, Kansas. A fun fact about me is I love national parks. I have like some posters over here. You probably can't see them. And my goal is to go to all of the ones in the continental U.S. someday.
Lindsay Barish, you're next.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Barash, actually.
Sorry.
No, you're good. I am from Leawood, Kansas, and I'm not that interesting, but this is my dog. Her name's Miley.
Cool. Brittany.
Hi, I'm Brittany. I'm originally from New Jersey, but I go to KU, so in Lawrence. And then my fun fact, I guess, is I've been to over 15 countries in my life.
Brittany, I know we've had this conversation before, but I've spent a lot of time in South Jersey in my life. So I was playing some Bruce today to my coworkers. That's how good it is. Okay, we'll stop talking about New Jersey. Ashlyn, you're next.
I'm Ashlyn Shultz. I'm a 2L in law school. I'm originally from Manhattan, so I did my undergrad at K-State. And the fun fact that I always reuse is that in high school, my graduating class was 4 people.
Cool. Haley.
Hi, everybody. I'm Haley. I am from Benton, Kansas, which is this little tiny town outside of Wichita. And I guess my fun fact is I'm currently in the Kansas Union. So I don't know if that's super fun, but that's where I am.
Michaela.
Hi guys, I'm Michaela Stevens. I'm originally from Scott City, Kansas, which is the tiny town in western Kansas. And I guess fun fact, I like to play the piano and I run distance.
Damien.
Hey everyone, I'm Damian Berger. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. Fun fact about me is that I played basketball and soccer for like 10 years, but my favorite sport is now golf.
Kylie.
Hi, I'm Kylie. I'm from Lee Summit, Missouri. And a fun fact about me is that I love Taylor Swift.
Matt, who is a Philly girl, by the way, so Bucks County. Or actually, she's from Reading. Anyway, cool. Madison.
Hi, everyone. I'm Madison Hain, and I'm from Overland Park, Kansas. And a fun fact about me is that I have 2 Australian Shepherds for dogs.
Jade.
Hello, I'm Jade. I'm from Kansas City, Missouri. And a fun fact about me is I just got an Australian poodle mix puppy. So she's at home. I love her to death.
Jake.
Hey everybody, Jake Schmidt. I am a 3L in law school right now. I went to KU undergrad. I'm originally from Atchison, Kansas. And my fun facts I guess this isn't super fun. This wasn't super fun for me, but when I was in first grade, I broke my arm and my leg just within a week of each other. I've since become a safer individual, but I was a pretty reckless child.
My son this year broke his arm on his 4th day ever of school. Watch out for those monkey bars, people. They're dangerous. Kathy.
Hi, I'm Kathy Burton. I'm also from Manhattan, Kansas. And a fun fact about me is I love baking, and I actually work at a bakery here in Lawrence.
Cool. Justin.
Hey everybody, my name is Justin Watkins. I'm one of the K-Staters. I'm from Wichita, Kansas. And a fun fact about me is I'm planning at the end of the semester on getting a Bernie Doodle puppy.
Emily.
Hi everyone, I'm Emily O'Donnell. I'm originally from St. Louis, Missouri. And my fun fact is that I'm left-handed.
Cool. Tracy.
It's clear why I don't have my video on. I'll be quick. I'm Tracy. I direct the pre-law program over at K-State. I'm so proud of all these K-Staters that are heading to law school. And fun fact, I've got 2 toddlers.
I don't believe it. So, my fun fact, because I can't pass, is that I once went to Corey Feldman's birthday party. Now, for anyone your age who knows who Corey Feldman is, he's one of the 2 Coreys. That's how you know who he is. So that is really great. We got a lot of interesting students here. So why don't we just get started with the conversation now? I'll ask the first question, and then hopefully you guys all chime in. You can either unmute yourself or just post the question in the chat section. But my first question is a pretty big, broad one to Jake and Ashlyn. Can you talk about that transition from undergrad to law school, that first, the first week? Let's focus on that.
I'll take a shot at it. Yeah, it is I like to talk about it the way our former dean of career services used to use an analogy that law school, especially your first semester, they're essentially breaking your brain apart and then rebuilding it back up piece by piece. So you're really starting to learn a new way to look at things. In each of your classes, in each of your doctrinal classes, and in your lawyering skills classes too. You come to law school with some ability to research and some ability to write well, obviously, but you're really learning a new way, a new style of writing. So yeah, that's a kind of a stressful thing about your first week, especially in your first semester generally. But I think that the KU does a really good job of preparing you for that. I mean, we do. There's a lawyering skills boot camp the first 3 or 4 days of law school that you'll come in, and the lawyering skills professors will kind of walk you through in a nice, gentle way before they throw you into the fire. The kind of the basics of reading these cases and what you want to get out of them. Writing case briefs so you can remember everything when you're on call for a class. Stuff like that. But it is really, it is a lot different from undergrad. So don't come in thinking that, because you were an all-star in undergrad, that you're just gonna kind of walk all over everybody. I mean, everyone that's in law school now was an all-star in undergrad and is a really smart individual. But that's not to say you should feel like you don't belong, because you all absolutely do. It's just, you got to take those steps, like Professor Mulligan was talking about, outside of class. Become a self-starter if you're not already, to really learn this material and have it down.
I shared a lot of the same experiences that Jake did. Coming into the very first week, you do the lawyering boot camp. That was terrifying for me. But it really doesn't have to be. It's just because it's a brand new environment. For me, I was coming from K-State, so it was a brand new university as well. The thing that helped me throughout the first week and throughout the entire first year is just breaking things down into little steps and saying, what can I do right now? What can I do in 20 minutes? What can I do today? And not worrying about what do I have to do tomorrow? What can I do today to help prepare me for tomorrow so that I'm not getting caught up in my own head, worrying about everything that's coming up. But yeah, it is going to be very different. It's kind of terrifying in the first week, learning about all these ways to learn that wow, I'm going to use learning this 3 times in the same sentence. Learning the ways that you're going to learn how to learn, because it's very different. When you're an undergrad, you read the books, you go to lecture, but in law school, you read the books and you do a lot of your learning before you get to the lecture. And then the lecture helps test maybe what you didn't pick up so well, what you did pick up really well, where you can improve, and the things that you learn how to do, reading cases and picking up important facts and important law and how to apply that law. Sounds really scary at first, and it kind of is your first semester because it's brand new to you, but it is something that you start to pick up on, and it becomes a lot more comfortable and familiar that, you know, now in my second year, I just hardly think about it at all. So it does get better.
Okay, who's going to be brave and ask the first question? Michaela posted one. Excellent. Have you worked a job while in law school? And if so, how many hours did you work per week?
I have not worked a job while I've been in law school. I know people do it. I know a lot of my friends work, you know, in the library or maybe as research assistants. And I think the law school has a policy of like no more than 20 hours a week or something like that, or they recommend no more than 20 hours a week. Maybe Professor Mulligan or Dean Freedman can speak about that. I'm not certain on that number. But yeah, I know it's certainly possible to do it and still do very well.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend getting a job in your first year if you can avoid it. Of course, if you can't avoid it, you have to do what you have to do. But it's going to be such a overwhelming, different environment that sometimes it's helpful to just be focused entirely on school. I do know a couple of people who have like worked in the library or worked jobs where they can do like their homework while they're working. And I've heard it suggested that if you're going to get a job, that's what you should look for. I was actually a tutor last semester, which is a really like low commitment, like 3 hours a week. And that wasn't bad once you get into your upper level classes and you kind of know what's going on. But I wouldn't recommend it in your first year.
Just to follow up on Ashlyn's point, I think there's a big difference between your first year and your second and third year. For many students in their second and third year, not only can you get a job, many folks might have a job either with a government agency or with a firm where you can work those 20 hours a week. And that work is also going to be really furthering your educational and training experience and really working hand in hand. You're not at all competent to do that type of work as a 1L. And for most 1Ls, the workload and learning curve as a 1L is incredibly steep. Not that 2Ls aren't working really hard. It's just for most people qualitatively different. So if it's a thing that you can afford to do, it for most folks greatly benefits them to not work or to have like a library job where honestly they're every 5 minutes you get interrupted, but really you're getting paid to study. It would be really important for your success.
Okay, from Justin, have either of you been on Journal? If so, how many hours a week did you spend working on it?
I'm gonna let Ashlyn actually take this one first because we're actually both on Journal and we work together a lot. We're on the same team.
Yeah, so I'm in my first year on the Journal. Actually, it's on the law review. So I don't know exactly how the Journal operates, but I can give you my perspective from being on the law review in the first year. It's a lot of work. what you do is you end up editing articles and you edit footnotes, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it ends up being a bit. And you also work on a paper. You come up with like some original legal idea and you end up writing like a 25 to 30 page paper on it. My incoming class just finished up with that. And it feels great to be done, but it's a lot of work, but it's also really rewarding. And I don't know exactly what to expect. I'm actually going to be stepping into the role that Jake had this year. But it's very rewarding, and I would recommend it even despite the workload.
I'll take a little bit more in case anyone's not familiar with what journal and law review are. I'll talk a little bit about that before I answer. So that's not something you're going to worry about all that much your 1L year. Essentially, the spring of your 1L year, you'll have an opportunity to do what's called the write-on competition, where everyone will work on the same problem and write a 10-page kind of quasi article about it. And it's to write on for the two legal publications that we have at the KU Law, which is the Kansas Law Review and the Kansas Journal of Law and Public Policy. And kind of like Ashlyn said, these publications are focused on producing really high quality legal scholarship. And so your second year, you'll have the opportunity to kind of write your own comment, is what we call them, kind of dissecting and getting really deep into a legal issue that you find interesting and that's really timely, as well as editing the work of legal scholars like Professor Mulligan, who write articles and then submit them because they want some help with the blue booking end of things, because nobody really likes to do blue booking. So yeah, that's all to say that it is a really worthwhile experience, and I hope you all choose to write on your spring semester of 1L. And as far as the time commitment, it definitely depends which year you're in. Like Ashlyn said, she was in her first year of law review this year, and that's kind of you've got different priorities and different things that you're working on. You're working on your comment that year. I'm in my second year. I'm on the board as an articles editor, so I kind of have a laser focus on editing articles from professors that send us their pieces for publication. So that definitely takes up a lot of my time in the week when we have articles due. I don't know if I could give you a rough estimate of hours, but it does take a lot of time. But it is, like Ashlyn said, very rewarding.
I could just add as such a background for folks who don't know what these are. So the law review and then the law journal are these academic publications, but also sort of a student organization with its own leadership structure and participation. That's those membership in those organizations, as well as moot court and mock trial, are considered very prestigious and are great experiences for you to have, and many folks find them helpful in the job market. But there's many other experiences which is great or just as great, whether it's being on the mock trial team, being on the leadership of a really large organization, such as being president of Women in Law, or any other number of things. When you get into that second year, finding one, maybe two other places where you can put in some energy and build skills, show leadership, is important. And there's lots of different ways to do that. The journal's just being two examples.
Yeah, I always say there's a lot of really cool, fun things to do in law school, and those are two of them. But pretty much anything that's cool or fun in law school tends to be a lot of work. But it's, I think if you talk to most people, they'll say it's worth it. And those are the clubs that you compete to get on. But most of our student clubs, obviously, it's not a competition to get on. And we do have a large variety of student clubs with a lot of different interests. So we have another question here. Great question from Brittany. This is something, boy, I think 90% of law students feel, and the 10% that don't, they're probably not doing it the right way. And that is about imposter syndrome. Can you guys talk about that? Did you ever feel that way? And what were some ways you worked to give you the confidence that you actually do belong?
I'll be honest, I'm kind of still struggling with that into my second year. I don't know if it's something that goes away for most people, but it hasn't gone away for me yet. It's something you kind of, for me, building up confidence comes through getting prepared, for being prepared for things. So that's how I combat it. But you just got to remember that, you know, you were accepted into law school. That's a really big deal. I mean, the fact that you're in law school means that you're meant to be there, and that you can do it. So just remembering that you can get through it. Sometimes it seems like you can't, but I promise you that you can. And remembering that, you know, if you work hard and you're doing all the preparation that you need to do, eventually you're going to get to a right place. Sometimes it takes more work. For some people, it takes more work than others, but if you put in the time, you'll get there.
Yeah, I definitely echo what Ashlyn said. You know, I'm a 3L in my last semester. I've done this for 5 semesters now, and I still have times where I'm like, man, you know, I'm really just not that smart. If I like picked up anything in these last few years, like what's going on? And you know, the way I combat that is also like Ashlyn is, you know, you got to kind of really just kind of reflect at the end of the day on all these things that you've accomplished to this point to get you into law school, and 2, as you go through law school, you know, you're going to have things that you accomplish, and you had a good grade last semester in this class. You had this thing that you worked on that was, you know, that was praised by your peers, or whatever the case may be. You'll all have things to look at that are strong evidence to the contrary that you don't belong here. And one thing that I always have to tell myself is along with kind of having imposter syndrome is I don't take compliments very well. So like when someone tells me, you know, oh, Jake, great job on that, I thought you answered that question really well in class, or something like that, I kind of hear it, but I kind of let it go in one ear and out the other. Like, you know, they're just saying that, or they don't really believe that, or no, like if someone's recognizing your work, if someone's complimenting you, if the professor writes something on your paper, you know, good job, take that to heart and know that, you know, you did the work, you put in the work to get to that point. And know that you're not alone in experiencing imposter syndrome. I mean, like Dean Freedman said, I'd be surprised if most, if not all of my classmates didn't experience the same thing. And yeah, so that's what I'd say about that.
If I
Great.
can just add one more thing.
Go ahead.
You'll probably really likely experience this when you're in class, especially like the first couple times you get cold called on, and you're just thinking, man, I did not answer these questions as well as some of the other people in my class did. But you got to remember that most of the people are thinking about how they're doing and not how you look. That's something that took me a little while to realize, but it helps out when you get cold called.
Yeah, I think go ahead.
Sorry. I was just to add on that point, like a personal anecdote. I was talking to a friend the other day about 1L, and one of my first cold calls, Professor Lucas in contracts, he's the mayor now, but I think he still teaches at the law school. He called on me and made me stand up and kind of give an argument in defense of, you know, some position or something. And I remember being super embarrassed about it. I don't know what I said, but I knew in the moment that I wasn't saying the right thing. And I was talking to my friend the other day. He absolutely did not remember that. No one remembers it after it's over, 5 minutes after it's over, 10 minutes after it's over. They're all thankful it just didn't happen to them. So take those experiences as learning moments, but definitely don't beat yourself up about them too long.
Yeah, I think one nice thing the students have done is they formed a student club called the 3-to-1 Club. I'm pretty sure that's still around. And that's just pairing a third-year student with a first-year student. And so it's like an automatic mentor when you get there. And, you know, they can really help give you that confidence and give you those kinds of tips, the kinds of things that Ashlyn and Jake just talked about. We have a question about housing from Lindsay. How do students at KU find housing? Is it hard? Is there, and I'll tell you, we do have a roommate finder service if you want to get a roommate. And also we encourage people to post on as we get closer to the end, post on Facebook, say, hey, is this place a good place? Hey, can you recommend some good places? But Jake and Ashlyn, why don't you talk about housing?
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of didn't do the right thing with housing, I don't think, because I lived with a bunch of my friends from undergrad as I was in my 1L year. They were all in their senior year, just kind of goofing off all week, and I was kind of down in my cave studying because I couldn't, you know, I couldn't goof off as much as they could, certainly. So I, you know, I don't regret. It's hard to say I regret that because they're my really good friends, and I'm happy I lived with them for that time for our senior year. But if that's something you're concerned about maybe getting distracted in your 1L year by, you know, wanting to have that experience, what is still your senior year. I would recommend against that. I know a lot of my good friends have used the KU law class of 2023 or whatever it is that you guys have, 2024, I guess you guys would be, to, you know, find roommates within your class. And I think for the most part, I haven't ever heard a really bad story about that. The only kind of bad thing about living with law students is that you'll find out pretty quickly that law students have no personality other than being a law student. That's all we can talk about is law school anymore, because it's this huge thing that's all going on in our lives that we just really can't stop talking about. But I think that's another good option.
Yeah, I went a more traditional route. I just looked on like apartments.com or whatever and visited a couple that I thought would be interesting. But I live alone. I lived alone my first year as well. And that really suits my personality. I just can't work when there's like talking going on or anything like that. But if you're the kind of personality, if you have the kind of personality where you really thrive being around other people, I would say it's okay to get roommates, but you should get roommates that have the same goals in mind, because I've heard some horror stories about living with college students when you're in your first year, and just how distracting that can be. So if you're going to get roommates, I would recommend looking for other law students or maybe other graduate students where you're all kind of on the same track, and you know how important school is to you, so you are dedicating the time that you need instead of getting distracted.
Oh, and I can just give you the short answer to how to find housing. There's two very popular apartment complexes near campus. I'm not paid by either, but I'm telling you, a lot of our students live at Chase Courts and Meadowbrook because they're both close to campus. They're both reasonably well maintained. So at least that's a starting point for you. I mean, there's lots of other places too, but I know a lot of students have lived in those two places. What's the next question? Study techniques. Madison, and you guys are welcome to unmute yourself and ask too, or we can do it this way, that's fine. So Madison asks about, you know, good study techniques for law school in particular. Have you ever, either of you done this read a week ahead during the 1L year?
Sorry, Jake. I started getting ahead, reading like 1 week ahead in my 1L year, and I very quickly abandoned that because it did not work for me. Because I would end up reading for the class. I'd spend a lot of time writing briefs, making sure that I knew everything that was important about the cases. And then in 2 days, I'd forget all of it. So in order to be prepared, I have to reread my briefs in big detail, and I'd have to go and reread the cases. So that did not work for me. At most now I read maybe 1 or 2 classes ahead. So if I'm having class tomorrow, I might read for the class that comes after that. And that system ends up working okay as long as you can keep things straight in your head. But I wouldn't recommend it your first year unless you find that it works for you, because there's just so much going on. It can be hard to keep all that straight.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it right now, and I'm thinking back to 1L to try and remember what the heck I did. That seems so long ago now. But a week in advance seems kind of like a lot. You have, 4 classes for each of your doctrinal classes in a week. And kind of like Ashlyn said, I would worry about if you read them all on, Saturday and Sunday, and then you were kind of prepared in that you've read it all for the week, but forgetting about that stuff because you've read so much material, as right before you go into class, you're like, oh shit, I don't remember this case at all, or I don't remember kind of these series of cases. So if you want to do that, and again, it's all about finding what works for you, what works with your schedule, and what works for how you study. If you want to do that, I would recommend to leave some time before each class to kind of, at the very least, skim over your notes, skim over the cases again to review them, try and remember kind of the pieces that are important, the pieces you thought were important. Professor Mulligan looks like has something to add.
I would say the other big thing, actually, I think you're going to spend a lot more of your time studying back in time than studying ahead. And I think for most of you, that's really going to be a difference from your undergraduate experience. The reason you all are here is that you're crazy smart type A people. And so for the majority of you, you read your stuff for class, you went to class, and that was enough. You wrote papers or whatever, but that was really enough. Maybe you crammed for an exam. You don't have to tell me that's really what you did, but because I know. You will spend so much of your time working backwards, producing some species of what we call an outline here, for the course. And I don't want to we could spend hours talking about what that would mean, but of trying to backfill so that you understand in November, what the heck happened in August? Because if you're not doing the August stuff, at least every couple of weeks, it's going to evaporate. And how does the August stuff Lego block into the November stuff? And how do I build those things together? So a lot of that study time for most students really isn't working ahead as it is working backwards. So, I tell folks, look, the average attorney in the United States spends between 52 and 55 hours a week at work. You should be spending at least that, if not more, to be successful. You're going to spend 15 hours a week in class. You're probably going to spend, another, 25 or so just preparing for class, right? So that additional 15 hours at minimum, you're probably going to be not working ahead on reading, but probably going back and backfilling so that you understand how these things work together in a process called outlining, which becomes very individualized. By the time you're a 3.0 like Jake, the way Jake's going to do it is going to be really different from the way Ashlyn do it. You're sort of building out that skill set. So that's really where your time will be spent. But that's sort of a mystery that we can talk about maybe second or third week of September.
Yeah, and that is one of the challenges of starting law school, is finding what works for you. Because what worked in undergrad may work, but quite possibly it's not going to work. And so finding a new way. Study groups is another topic that comes up a lot. I found them very helpful. I thought they were great. I had a great study group, especially that first year. Other people it didn't work for them. You have to, I think one key is to make sure, similar to what Jake said about roommates, make sure your study group members are on the same page about how serious they're going to take it, because the obvious downfall of a study group is it's just a place for friends to chat. It becomes a live chat room instead of a study room. You got to really take it seriously, put yourself out there. I always found, for me, the benefit of the study group was we would each take turns teaching each other a section or a concept or a principle. And I always felt that if you could internalize it enough that you could teach someone else something, then the material. And similarly, it also helps with your listening skills. And that's one thing you really need in law school, are great listening skills, and as an attorney. And so if you can teach yourself to listen to your study partners and really listen to what they're saying. But you got to find the one that works for you. Just because that worked for me and my partners doesn't mean that that's going to be what's going to be most effective for you. Outlines are another hot topic. What do you guys think about outlines?
I felt like outlines were, when I was entering law school, this super scary concept that everyone kept talking about, but I had no idea what it was because I didn't know any lawyers, didn't know anyone who had gone through law school before. But it's a really simple concept. It's really just kind of like Professor Mulligan said. It's a way that you remember what happened the last 3 months of the class. So the way I do it is I literally just go through my notes and as I'm going through, I piece together, the different holdings of cases. I'll throw in, hypotheticals that make sense to me, that I understand, to help me understand these different legal rules that you're learning. And kind of like Professor Mulligan said, I mean, these are all building on each other. And that's going to become clear in your classes and in a way that, as long as you're putting in that work outside of class to keep up with it, as well as look back on what you've done, it's going to make sense when you outline. It's just getting that whole picture together, so you can answer that big hypothetical that just ends with a really open-ended, what are Mr. A's legal obligations and rights in this situation. But don't get too concerned about that right now. I mean, there's going to be a lot of information for you in your 1L year in your first semester about techniques and how to go about that process, because that really could take 3 hours to talk about.
Yeah, it was also very scary for me coming into law school because I didn't know anyone who had been through that before. I would say don't think about it while you're trying to get ready just to be in law school your first couple weeks. It's not something that you need to worry about when you're just barely starting out. But that's where most of your preparation for your test is going to come in. At least in my experience, it's just like Jake said, you're going through your notes, you're taking what was important from this day, what was I supposed to get out of like this hypothetical from class, which is another thing. You should pay attention to hypotheticals because they often tell you rules, and just make note of those things. So it's just piecing things together. What did we learn in the first week of class versus how does that fit into what we're learning in our last week of class? And organizing it not necessarily according to the cases in just like a linear fashion, but according to the ideas. At least that's a lot more helpful to me when I'm on a test. But when I was a 1L, they did an event where 2Ls and 3Ls came in and they showed 1Ls their outlines and how to do it. And if they do that, I would highly recommend it because that helped me out a lot.
We have time for about 2 more questions. I'm gonna, I usually prefer people ask the grading curve questions at the beginning of the program because it is probably the least fun aspect of law school. I think everyone would agree. And possibly the one that does cause a lot of stress. But let's be open and honest about it. So we'll take that question now, and then we'll have time for one more question. But someone think of a nice softball question to follow up on after the tough fastball that is, or the tough curveball that is the grading curve.
Yeah, the curve. It's this whole new scary thing that law school is pretty famous or infamous for, and for good reason. I mean, it is kind of this. I mean, you could talk about it in one sense. In a lot of law schools, and kind of the horror stories you hear from law schools, is that it makes it so competitive because you're all being graded on the same curve. You're all fighting for that A or that A- or whatever the case may be. Competitive to the point of it kind of just being impossible to be in the law school building without exploding from anxiety. I've never, starting that off with that horror story, I've never felt quite that way at KU. I think KU does a really good job while we're still, you know, competing with each other for these grades, still being really collegial and really making great friends your first year. My best friends now are some of my small section friends. And just one last thing on the curve, I would say, don't focus on what everyone else is doing, because that's a really that's a temptation you'll have, is to focus on, well, if I can just do better than him, or is he studying more than me? Is she doing this? Are they doing that? Don't focus on what other people are doing. Just focus on how you're learning the material, how you're preparing for class, how you're preparing for the exam. And yeah, don't get caught up in what's really easy to get caught up in is how do I fit into this? You'll find out. Like, you just do your best and work your hardest, and things will go just fine.
Yeah, the curve is still kind of a mystery to me. My philosophy with exams, though, is just going into it knowing that I've done all the preparation I can, and I am going to do the best that I possibly can on this exam. I'm going to, stay focused. And that's given me a lot of peace of mind, walking away from exam, not thinking about like, oh, geez, was I good enough to get a B or an A? But knowing that I did my very best, and the cards are going to fall as they will. But one thing I will note that's a little tangential is, after you get your grades, I wouldn't discuss those with your friends, because it's not helpful to compare yourself to other people. It just brings you heartache and stress, and it just really doesn't matter that much in the long run.
Can I add one other thing? It's also my experience that the curve actually improves everyone's grade. And that's something you should know. I had people earning Bs in their 1L class last semester who got 50% of the points available on the exam. So if we were actually handing out grades based on percentage, right, everyone would fail. And that's usually the experience in most of the classes. So it really is just a true sort of a ranking performance. So it's not like we all would have earned A's, but for the curve, usually no. Not usually, always no. Right. And so I would put that aside. The other thing I would say is it's my experience that law school success is 95% organization and work ethic. And if you're honest with yourself about your work ethic, like, how many hours am I actually working with social media off? I turned off text. I really was actually 100% present and working. How many real hours did I put into it? Those people are the B plus, A- students every year without fail. It's the people who really aren't putting in that kind of high quality work when they're honest with themselves. And so you will work with your peer. You're never going to out clever your peers or other lawyers, but you might be able to outwork them or work hard enough to keep up with them. So that's entirely within your control, right? That's something you can do.
I'll just say, you also have to define your own success. I mean, first of all, just getting into law school, or just graduating law school, my goodness, it's 3 years. That's a success. Good grades can open up some doors. We're not going to suggest otherwise, but there are a lot of doors out there. And we have tons of successful alumni who either drive fancy cars or do really life-fulfilling work, who didn't finish in the top half of the class. You have to be honest with yourself when you get your grades and say, well, maybe these opportunities might not be there. Let me think about these other opportunities. Because some employers are very grade focused. A lot of employers are more focused on you. What are you going to be? Someone who could communicate with a client? Are you someone who can build trust with a client quickly? Are you someone, or if it's criminal law, for example, are you someone who can present yourself in the courtroom, have command of the facts, have command of the case? So a lot of your talents and abilities don't show up in your grades, but they do show up when you go out in the legal community, and we work to get you out there. So, you know, maybe you could say getting high grades is the easy way to get, you know, the job you want out of law school. It's not the only way. And so I think, and just, I mean, me and Professor Mulligan meet alumni all the time. And yeah, some of them did finish top in their class and went on a straight shot to some pretty cool opportunities. Other people ended up in pretty cool places with hardly finishing near the top of their class. So
some of them finished at the top of their class and didn't go anywhere.
That's right.
Because, to be frank, they didn't have great people skills, and they weren't able to succeed in a lot of those other spaces. So, you know, I so love what Dean Freedman said: define your own success. If you allow a grade on an exam from a 4-hour experience to be how you self-define, right, that's going to be tough for you. And I would add, just in the practice of law, you're not going to win every trial. You're not going to master every contract. You're not going to win every hearing, right? So you can't put your self-definition in that fleeting success of whatever it is, grades, this trial, this real estate deal, or whatever. You're going to have to find a deeper foundation. But you all have that, which is why you're here. You are high character people. You've shown that already. So you just have to not let yourself get taken off that path.
Cool. You know, I think this is a good spot to end. It is around 7 o'clock. And you guys know we have lots of these events coming up. We wanted to do one special for the lead students. Next Tuesday, we have the Summer Start event. And then the following week, we have a big event with all sorts of faculty. Professor Mulligan will be there again. He loves coming out at night on Zoom. So we have these great events. You know, we are starting a visit program soon. So if you want to sit in on a class, that information should come out probably tomorrow. If not tomorrow, then early next week. So if you want to come by and sit in on a class, you are welcome to do that. Take some of the mystery out, and we'll have tours also that you can do socially distanced and mask and all that. But that is there for you. But just want to thank everyone. We're so excited to have you coming in. It's, you know, you'll hear from folks. I talk to alumni all the time. Everyone says it was hard. Almost every alum I ever talk to shines when they talk about their time at KU, and really, I think values the time they had here and the education they got. So, you know, don't be too intimidated. Yeah, it's hard work, but you knew that when you applied to law school, and you guys have all proven you have what it takes to do it. So I want to thank Jake and Ashlyn for coming out on a weeknight in the middle of their schedule, and Professor Mulligan for coming out on a weeknight, and Tracy, thank you so much. And I wish you hadn't muted yourself. I love your kids, seem really adorable. So would have been, at least for a minute or two, you know, hear kids' laughter would be fun. And for the rest of you, thank you so much. Rock Chalk Jayhawk, and go Wildcats. So we'll see you all soon. Have a great night.